We're really excited to have you all here for this event. We are going to be having an excellent panel for you all today. I'm looking forward to introducing Sarah and Arid in just a moment. Will be your official host for the day. But I just want to tell you really quick a little bit about Connectoc. So the Connectoc Coalition is funded by the Orange County Healthcare Agency to bring mental health resources and events for the transitional age youth demographic, young adults, folks 16 to 24 and their families and friends and those who care for them, to the broader community. So that's what we're here to do today, make some resources available to you all. As you well know, this event today is going to be focusing on the intersection of sports, student athletics, and mental health, especially now in the age of COVID-19. And I'm happy to turn it over to Sarah and Aridin. One last thing I want to mention to you all. Visit connect-oc.org for more information about the coalition. We'll post it here in the chat. And then in a bit, in about 45 minutes or so, as we get maybe 3/4 of the way through our event, we're going to be sharing a survey with you all. The survey is the way that we make sure that we're providing the best services we can for those who are attending our event. So if you get the opportunity, we'd love to have you fill that out. And to sweeten the deal, we're going to be offering a couple of giveaways for a raffle for folks who fill out the survey. So we'll post that in the chat and we'll remind you in a bit. I'll pop in about 45 minutes when that's that time. So again, handing it over to Sarah and Aridin. Welcome to introduce themselves and then they'll introduce the panel. Aridin, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure thing, David. Hello, everybody. My name is Aridin Chaudhary and I'm joined by my co-host, Sarah Petrus. Today, we're going to be discussing the impacts of athletics, academics, and COVID-19 on mental health. It is undoubtable that the current pandemic has had numerous adverse effects on those who are actively engaged in athletics. It is important to discuss those effects and in turn, offer some practical solutions for dealing with them.
Awesome, thank you, Aridin. Like he said, I am Sarah Petrus. I am one of the interns at Connectoc, and we are so excited to get started with you all. So I'm gonna go ahead and get us rolling in really quick here. So this is for all the panelists. If you could do a quick introduction, what led you to this field, and just some information about yourself and why you're passionate about athletes and health.
Improve upon. So the sooner you get your students working on that, the better, especially when being concerned.
I can get started. My name is Dr. Leilani Madrigal. I'm an assistant professor at California State University, Long Beach. I'm also a certified mental performance consultant. And what really got me into this field was I was a former college athlete. I played softball at Cal State San Marcos. And just during that time, I really knew the struggles, or I had a lot of struggles, with making mistakes on the field, trying to balance academics and social life, and having to put the time and energy to try and be my best out there. And it was really hard for me mentally not to carry those mistakes, especially in softball. I would make a mistake defense, I carried it on the offense, and it impacted my whole day. And I really wanted to be that person for someone else that can help them get out of that rut and really work on just improving their own well-being. So I'm excited to talk to you all today about some more things related to this.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. David Mitchell, a licensed psychologist at CSU Fullerton. My pronouns are he, his, him. I've been working at CSU Fullerton as the athletics liaison, and I just really have appreciated the many strengths that student athletes bring to the table, and I help them use their strengths to address whatever personal issues they're having or mental health struggles. I think that naturally they're leaders on campus, and so if I can help student athletes address their mental health stigma, I'm hoping that has effects for the rest of campus and society as a whole. Thank you.
All right, I can jump in. Peace and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Milo Dodson. Pronouns are him, he, and his. I had the honor of serving at UC Irvine as the athletics department liaison from the counseling center for about 7 years. I just happened to leave UC Irvine 2 months ago for a different position. But what I can share is that my passion really stemmed from growing up as an athlete playing basketball and tennis. And for me as a young Black boy in particular, always being told not to cry after I messed up or we lost a big game, championship, etc. Being not told, literally being told not to cry when someone pushed my head into the cement when we were playing basketball. So all the negativity and masculinity concerns, I saw a lot of that coming out in sports. And so finally getting to college and having a lot of friends that played D1 sports, really wanting to recognize like, hey, there's a combination here between psychology, mental health, and performance. And really, really just passionate and glad to be here with everyone tonight.
I can go ahead and go next. My name is Noah Alvarez. I currently reside as a coach at Santiago High School, which is in the city of Garden Grove here in Orange County. I grew up here in Santa Ana, and I went on to play college sports as well. But as I got older, at the higher level of sports, mental health was taking a toll on me because of stuff that was going on at home. And I think all of us who played sports as youth can remember the good coaches, the bad coaches, and what effect they had on our life. So that's why I'm super passionate about giving back to the youth. I've worked coaching soccer, basketball, and football at the middle school and elementary school level the past 3 years. It's my first year coaching high school. I'm glad that we got to have a season this spring. So thank you for having me.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me now? I'm Dr. Bill Beecham. I'm Executive Director for the Center for Drug-Free Communities, and we have a full agenda this afternoon, and we have a great panel, I think. I come from an experience of college athletics. I was a participant for 4 years and coached for many years. And I've been with the U.S. Olympic Committee since right about 1990. So my first Olympics was 1992 in Barcelona. And my job is to educate athletes, coaches, parents of minor Olympians on the different chemicals that are out there, what's legal, what's not legal, how you can get your best performance through nutrition, psychological factors, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, let's get started.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. I appreciate you all to be here and take some time out of your busy schedules to help educate the community and to, really just raise awareness on the subject. I think is a little bit put under the rug. I think that we are finally starting to bring these to the surface. So I'm really excited that you're all here today. Aridin, you can go ahead and continue with us. The next question.
Okay, so let's get started. I'd like to pose this question to all of our panelists. Being in the midst of COVID-19, how has the mix of the pandemic, the athletics, and the academics taken a toll on mental health? What is the experience of the athletes with which you work?
Okay, I'll jump in. It's been an extremely challenging year. We've got elite athletes through our U.S. movement, and many of them had lost their funding last year in September because the Olympics were supposed to be done last summer, not this summer. So we're at 126 days from today, opening day ceremonies in Tokyo, and there's still a lot of discussion about preparation. And there's still a lot of discussion about vaccines. And there's still a lot of discussion as whether we're even going to have the Olympics in Tokyo in July. The IOC is 100% go. The Japanese Olympic Committee is, they're 90% go. But the Japanese public is not. So these are going to have to play out. What these do to our athletes, these kinds of things, is it puts them into almost a spiral. Because they're used to routine, they're used to being able to go to their gyms, they're used to being able to see their coaches. Am I interrupting? Keep going. Say yes. And it has affected their mental health dramatically, because we have the whole spectrum of mental health disorders in the Olympics too. You know, we have attention deficit disorders, attention hyperactivity deficit disorders, oppositional defiance. We could go down the list of substance abuse disorders, et cetera. So all of these things get actually exacerbated by the change in routine and the change in structure. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Dr. B. I'd like to jump in off that, echo sentiments. Students have really had a hard time dealing with the uncertainty. Zoom fatigue is real. Students having problems with motivation issues. And so, you know, in addition to all that is just this constant need for flexibility and the changing to, you know, what's going on right now in society. So I try to help my student athletes with developing their own routines. Normally the you know, coaching or somebody would be more responsible for what's going to be transpiring. But with the lockdowns and everything, I've had to help them take a more hands-on approach. And it's really patient specific. So some students are very isolated. You know, they could be across the country from family, or even, you know, across the world in some cases. So I try to help them find ways to connect. I try to find ways to be physically active, to work on that nutrition, and then to try to not be so hard on themselves. You know, they have high standards. They have these expectations for themselves. And it's really hard to meet those when you don't have that drive that you typically do. In addition to all that, I think that there's more grief than just the people that we've lost throughout this pandemic. People had their senior seasons gone, or their expectations of what going into college was going to be like. So dealing with all the many forms of loss is also part of my work right now. Thank you.
And just to follow up on that, you know, this past year, I've been doing a study at the university level, asking students, you know, what are the challenges you've been facing due to COVID-19? And a lot of that is around challenges of academics, trying to navigate the Zoom world and stay in front of a computer for hours on end. There's that lack of motivation. There's a lot of procrastination. I don't feel like doing things. It's really hard just to engage in class because maybe my professors are posting things where I review on my own, but I'm not feeling that connection. So that idea of isolation, just lack of support, are a lot of the challenges that students are experiencing right now in the academic setting. But there's also the personal challenges as far as adapting to, you know, change and postponed events, or adapting to that disruption in your routine. We also found, you know, these are compounding stressors. It's not like students were reporting one stressor and that was it. These are things that compounding over the year. We also asked, how are you coping with these stressors? And what we found was students and student athletes are using both adaptive, so they're exercising, they're reframing their thought processes, they're journaling, but they're also using maladaptive ways. They're not thinking about things, they're trying to avoid it, maybe suppressing things. So using both methods, but also engaging in those social support networks. So that was one thing we found in student athletes particularly. Prior to COVID, their number one source of support was teammates. But now that they're not seeing teammates as much, not engaging with them, it was how can I find new support systems and use them when I know I'm struggling.
Something else here that we're all kind of mentioning, and I'm not going to say anything new in this regard, but with the uncertainty, I think it's forced, or I should say afforded a lot of student athletes and departments the opportunity to recognize the significance of mental health. And so as we're talking about uncertainty, we're also, you know, more specifically, we're talking about anxiety. And one of the other components that we really have to put on the forefront here is the anxiety that comes with being a Black identified, being a person of color who also happens to be a student athlete. So when we're talking about our overlapping identities, we're talking about the pandemic, we're talking about the ongoing virus of racism in the world. We also really have to keep that in context here, because when we're seeing an increase in anxiety, we're seeing an increase in depressive symptoms, it's really allowed and kind of forced, like I said, some athletics departments to really have more conversations around better supporting student athletes. And I know I was a part of those conversations with the athletics department, with the esports program at UC Irvine as well. And so I think what I'll close here with is one of the ways I've heard 2020 described is kind of the Great Awakening. And so we're having an awakening and a reckoning really around not just mental health, not just civil unrest, not just a pandemic, but all of these at the same time. So it's that much more critical to provide student athletes and their families, to be honest, with the tools and the techniques to manage mental health and to continue to maintain mental health.
And just to add to that, here at the high school level, we've seen a lot of grades really drop this entire, not even just at the school particularly, but throughout the entire district. We're seeing a lot more Fs and Ds from students who usually are C and B students. And mind you, Garden Grove is a predominantly lower socioeconomic area, especially the neighborhoods that my high school is in, where I coach at. So a lot of these kids come from immigrant backgrounds. They have, big family households and crowded apartments. They don't have the best connection for, school, or just, I think the education system has taken a long look at itself, whether it's, district by district or the entire state as a whole, as to how can we help these students, give them the proper resources in a pandemic or not, because we're really seeing a lot of these students really fail. And with the absence of sports, that really gave them something to look forward to, something to, have positions of leadership, have, being able to work with a team, opportunities that they wouldn't necessarily get at home through their family experiences or through their circle already. So it's really taken a toll on a lot of these kids. And I know the moment we announced that season was going to happen this spring, a bunch of smiles lit up across the face. So that was really encouraging to see after a year of, being in the dark and a lot of uncertainty.
Thank you for that. I'd like to ask Dr. Madrigal a question specifically relating to what she just said. How have you seen student performance change in the last year? Could you talk about your initial findings in your current study, examining how COVID and other stressors have shaped the well-being of students?
Yeah, and I think I try to kind of get that in that first kind of statement there, but that lack of motivation is pretty high. We're actually surveying students again towards the end of the academic year. So we're going to see the overall span of like, how was that initially when there's so many uncertainties that happened and so many things in society that were happening this year, 2020, and things happening now in 2021. So it is this compound idea of the challenges that are facing, and not to just overlook them, but to really, address them and to really help people find healthy ways to cope and adapt and deal and connect and address some of these issues. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for all your answers. I'll move this over to Sarah. Thank you.
All right, so another question that can be for anybody can answer. If you don't feel comfortable or you don't have an answer, feel free, you can skip it over, but it's up to you. So, so many students have experienced a lack of motivation, like you have all said, during this time. So, and we have seen it's taken a toll on their grades. So, what advice do you have or coaching that you would give to an athlete who may be ineligible to play due to their low grades, or what strategies can you do to increase motivation?
Go ahead and start. In my work with student athletes who are having academic difficulties or maybe on probation, I'm certainly collaborating with other campus partners, making sure that they are meeting with academic counselors. Sometimes we're beating up those hours, giving them an extra 2 or 3 hours. Something that normally took them maybe 3 hours to do the work, I'm asking them to give themselves 5. Just knowing that, under these circumstances, it requires more time to get things done. I mean, the teachers are having to pivot too, and so they're changing some of the way that they teach, and that kind of sometimes it's helpful, and sometimes it makes it harder for these students. So whether it be safely getting together with peers for study groups, whether it be those academic counselors, whether it be increasing breaks, just, get in there, study for 30 minutes, take a 5-10 minute break. Sometimes that's all it takes to get kind of reset and be able to spend some more time studying. And then I'm looking at sleep too. Sometimes their sleep schedules are off. And so if I can help with that sleep hygiene, if I can get them to buy into using some relaxation skills, whether it's, slow, deep breathing, grounding techniques, progressive muscle relaxation. I'm really giving them some tools to kind of help them manage the stress and anxiety and hopefully help build up that motivation.
I think too, with changing that perspective, sometimes students come in and say, oh, I'm failing all my classes, or there's so much work to do. But can we just kind of maybe look at what is it this week? What is the one assignment I can focus on right now or today that will help me improve my grade? And really looking at things a little bit more minimally than making this really exacerbating the problem. And because when we think about it, it becomes overwhelming, and then we're like, oh, I'm just not going to do it. So if we just rethink that a little bit, that can help us with that motivation to, okay, I'll do this assignment, I'll do this reading. Another thing is just communicating. So if you're struggling in classes, are you communicating with the professors? Or are you maybe, not having a peer support group was something that we found. So maybe it's reaching out to some people in class and saying, I was really struggling with this assignment or this test. Can we have a study group? And really reaching out for that support. And I'm encouraging students and student athletes to really, engage in some of these processes to help with the grades.
Motivation is always kind of a tricky one because it's so individualized. It truly is. So you have to listen for what motivates an athlete, what motivates a student. And Noah, working with high school students, they used to ask me, why do you go to high school? Well, that's where you keep my friends. That was my response. And another one would be because I want to play sports. That's why I'm in high school. That's what keeps me there. And when that was pulled out from them, it became really difficult for a lot of kids to refocus. And then you have all those different learning styles that don't go well with virtual learning. The hands-on, the connectedness, the sense of belonging to a team. None of that is there. So finding your pod, finding your other athletes that are like you and that motivate you. One of the things we do at the Olympic Training Center is we have a podium, just a mock podium like you would have at the Olympics, right? And we have gold and we have silver and we have bronze, and we have an athlete go up to the podium and say, which one do you want to stand on? So then the obvious answer is, well, I want a gold medal. So we have them stand on that podium. We put a mock gold medal on them. We take a picture of them. And when we take the picture, that we go and get 10 prints of that picture and give it to them. Put it up everywhere you go during a day. The refrigerator, the bathroom, your car, your locker, wherever it is that you'll see it. So it reinforces your goal. And that's your goal to keep you motivated. Because when I say we're 126 days out from Tokyo, we're 126 days out. What are you doing today to get to that goal? And then restructuring the goal in terms of SMART. Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it time bound? All of those things. So that motivation becomes very individual, and finding out what is really going to motivate the individual person.
And to add to your point that you mentioned with the high school athletes, I think an addition of arts and creativity are really important too. I know we've seen the arts kind of get at the high school level, and most public schools, they kind of get taken away here and there over the years, and we're seeing less and less of that. But I've also been fortunate to work as a teacher's aide during this time and help some of the students and even lower level kids. I find that the most successful teachers, regardless of grade level, have sometimes ditched their curriculum and just had like art days where they, make something unrelated to what the topic they're teaching or their subject matter that they're teaching. But that expression really helps the kids at whatever age level kind of really get to express themselves. Could think about it, like you said, we like to go to high school because you got to see your friends, but you also got to dress and I think the way you dress sometimes was an art and showed a lot about yourself, and the way you carry yourself, sometimes the way you speak to others can be an art or a form of creativity. And kids are not having that outlet to properly, create a healthy outlet for them to creatively, put their art out there. And also growing up or living in this Garden Grove, Santa Ana area, we're seeing a lot more graffiti in the area than we have in years past. So I think that's, a big sign right there, is that the kids don't have this creative outlet to do things artistically in school. So now they're going to take to the streets and do it on the walls.
One of the most important things that I've found is reviewing more of the tenets on mindfulness. And I say mindfulness because not just in this like BuzzFeed word or buzzword out here, but to be really specific about paying attention on purpose with a non-judgmental attitude. And I'll reinforce the non-judgmental attitude, because correct me if I'm wrong, but nobody on this call right now or even watching this at any point has lived through a pandemic. So if you can't give yourself grace for going through something that nobody else alive or most people alive haven't, then like, when can you? So this is actually an opportunity for us to practice mindfulness, and in particular, having a flexibility of the mind. So when I'm meeting with a student athlete, I'll often draw a connection between the neuropsych work and the cognitive psych stuff around what type of thinking are you doing where it's so judgmental that that's actually getting in the way of your performance, not your skill, not your talent, not your ability, but your thought process. And so when we can actually be more compassionate and have more grace for ourselves, that allows our motivation to increase. And so when you're maybe ineligible, that's the practice that you're doing. You're continuing to be in the gym, you're continuing to practice and improve as a student athlete by working on your mental game. So I think, again, mindfulness is so important. Also taking a strengths-based approach to understanding and improving. So even though I can't do this, what I can do is X, Y, and Z. And having student athletes be that much more empowered around what they can do and what they're already doing well.
Yeah, those are all awesome points, and those are such amazing suggestions. Thank you so much. Arita, I will put it back to you.
Yeah, definitely. Those are very insightful. I would definitely agree that the pressures on student athletes have increased exponentially in the wake of this pandemic. I'd like to pose this question to all involved on the panel. You can provide your input if you wish to. What can you recommend student athletes do to reduce their overall stress and anxiety when trying to balance, academics and athletics?
I can jump in real quick. So I think one of my mentors used to tell me that the key to mental health is having a healthy balance of choices and options. And so when we feel like we have choices and options, i.e., when we feel like we have more control, then I'm going to feel more balanced. So in all of this external uncertainty between COVID, I know a lot of us were concerned back in November with the election, also concerned back in January, all this external uncertainty, it's going to increase anxiety and have us feel unbalanced. So internally, what can I do to focus my mind? What can I do to then focus my heart, or to decrease my heart rate and to allow myself to breathe? So when I can be that much more structured, when I can be that much more intentional about all of my actions internally and who I am, then I'm going to be able to navigate the external, because I can't go out into the world. I can't interact with other people to navigate all of these external systems if I'm not really, really clear about who I am. And that all starts with being that much more intentional with my choices and options.
See, I think this particular time in the last year has given people the opportunity to build self-confidence, not tear down their self-confidence. And building that self-confidence comes with certainly competing, but also getting more internally through biofeedback, through neurofeedback. David mentioned earlier progressive relaxation, systematic desensitization, where you've got muscle tension in your feet, in your legs, in your arms, in your chest, and how you perform with those kinds of stresses, and learning how to relax those areas so you can perform at a higher level. So you're going to be building in self-confidence, maybe better than other people, because they're going to be so disappointed about what's happened out there in the world. But we're going to do a paradigm shift on this. And the paradigm shift is, this is our opportunity to really work on our mind, our body, and our heart. And this is what we've been doing dramatically in the last year, because everything's been turned upside down in terms of training regimens. Another suggestion.
Another thing I'm seeing too, again, at the university level, a lot of classes, a lot of meetings are happening back to back. So, you're going from one space to another space without that gap to really kind of refresh yourself. So maybe building in those mental breaks, going outside if possible. So even if it's just a short walk around the neighborhood or park, just to get outside, just to take your self away from the screen. And then reminding yourself, some days are going to be good days and some days are going to be bad days. And when you are on a good day, maybe journal, maybe write out what made today good. What did I do today? What were some thoughts I was thinking today? And I say journal so that when you're having those bad days, you can go back and read, okay, what was I doing that day? What were the thoughts I was thinking that day? Just to help you, because it is a roller coaster. And we are going to have good days and there will be bad days. So trying to help ourselves in the best we can.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Also, we really try to cut down on the mental chatter. The mental chatter that's going on between our ears, that's driving us crazy. And if we can begin to reduce some of that mental chatter, we have a term for it. It's called stinking thinking. And stinking thinking gets you in trouble every single time. Okay.
Yeah, there's certainly a difference between finding solutions to the stresses and problems in your life versus just sitting there spinning your wheels and ruminating on them, driving up that stress level. A few other points, to what Mila was talking about, being here now focused, not worrying too much about the future, not dwelling on what happened in the past that we can't change. That can certainly be helpful to our students. In normalizing and validating the stress and anxiety, but not pathologizing it. Anxiety and stress are not the enemy. There's a sweet spot where that anxiety is driving you to action. It's helping you be successful. And we just need to find a way to get you in that optimal area where you're working towards your goals, whether that be academic or on the field. And so, we've talked about many different ways that you can approach it. It is also very personal. Some students that I work with, they just do not like the deep breathing. But, the walks or the times with their animals or the peer support or the guided meditations, that's their thing. So we just got to find the ways that help you get into that optimal range of stress and anxiety.
Just to add to that, make it quick. I know a lot of you have mentioned, taking the break at the park, going out for a walk, but I just ultimately think too, taking the break from social media, especially what I've seen from the high school level, a lot of them get caught up with looking at these different, IG models or different IG influencers and the lives that they live. And I think that adds to their anxiety sometimes because they get caught up in the moment of like, oh, I want this, I want that, but I'm so far from it. And they might come from different households where that's not very feasible at the moment. And of course, during a pandemic, I think we take for granted too, we're adults, we could, if we wanted to debrief, we could drive to the park, at our own will, but sometimes kids a lot younger who don't have their license don't have that luxury. So I think taking a break from social media also contributes.
Thank you for all those points, everybody. They were very perceptive. Sarah, you can take over.
Thank you. So another question that we have, just talking about COVID, we lost our sense of routine as society, and especially with athletes and students, they just don't have a routine anymore. So do you have any recommendations or advice to help these students and these athletes to creating a routine that is good for them again?
I can jump in.
You go right ahead.
Thank you, Doc. I've worked with Major League Baseball. I've worked with the National Football League, et cetera. And one of the things that we found that is one of the most significant things is sleep, and how sleep interacts with performance and functioning. And what we have found is that testosterone, which is a performance drug that we have internally to our systems, testosterone is produced in REM state of sleep. And if you're not getting into REM state of sleep for about 4 hours a night, your testosterone levels are going to be much lower the next day. So your performance levels will be dramatically impacted in a negative way. So working through sleep patterns is really critical. What we have found in the last year is that their exercise regimen, their routine of their training has changed their sleep patterns. So they're not going to sleep at a regular time. They're not getting good sleep patterns, and the general anxiety disorders begin to set in because their performance levels are starting to go down. So, most people don't even think about that. Sleep is sleep, and it's not. It's not at all. Sleep does so many other things so we can perform at higher levels. I'll leave it at that.
And I'd like to add to that, not only sleep, but nutrition as well. Working with a lot of high schoolers, a lot of them, sometimes you ask them what they ate before practice, and a lot of them will say nothing. And then you ask them how much water they drank since yesterday's practice, and they'll say maybe a water bottle. So really installing from a young level or from a young age, the importance of, good sleeping habits and good nutrition habits too, because our bodies are like cars. We need, proper gasoline, proper oil, proper care for our body to perform at the highest level.
Terrific.
Yeah, I love the idea of fueling ourselves and watching our overall intake. So not even just on a nutritional or hydration level, but Coach Alvarez, as you were talking about there earlier, what you're consuming in terms of social media and what type of movies, TV shows, et cetera, that you're also consuming. So definitely love that piece. And as it relates to that, when we're trying to create routine, I think it's that much more helpful for a lot of folks to have a visual in front of us. So when I'm working with people, I will either have them write it out, or I have a 24-hour, 24/7 chart in front of us. And on that chart, I'm having them literally write sleep and having them carve out 7 to 8 hours. Because when we have a visual aid, we know, from the research, when people have it in front of us, they're more likely to be able to accomplish that goal. So having the visual aid, having that routine to build out sleep. And then the other thing here is to reward ourselves with whatever is exciting for us, whatever we're going to find joy from, and to not have that self-care be dependent on doing something else first. So as an example, I don't need to reward myself after I read 50 pages. I need to reward myself just because I need to nourish myself, just like I need to sleep. So I think sometimes we get that confused, and the dependency isn't so great there. And then the last thing about routine, for me, to be honest, it's also about self-care as a mindset and not a behavior. So I'm not as interested for folks to have these lavish lifestyles on Instagram or to be influencers, but their negative self-talk is going on 24/7. I'm more interested in trying to support somebody, be kind and patient with themselves, and working that into their routine on a regular basis.
Yeah, let me take that one step further. at the Olympic Training Centers in Colorado Springs, we have 500 beds for athletes throughout the world that come there. We have Chula Vista down by San Diego. We have about 102 beds. We have Lake Placid, New York with about 90 beds. And at all of those, we make sure that, and this is back to you, Noah, that social media is turned off. All electronics are turned off an hour to an hour and a half before bedtime. So the prefrontal cortex in that brain can slow down, because otherwise it's just being bombarded with stuff. And it's very difficult then for it to ratchet down so you can go to sleep fairly quickly and not wait for an hour to go to sleep. Social media to a high school adolescent is massive. And if you tell them no social media after 9 o'clock, they go, oh my God, can't do that. Well, then you're sabotaging yourself.
In a lot of my individual work, as students are telling their stories, I used to, back before the pandemic, I was on track. I was doing well academically. I was doing well in my sport. But then, there just wasn't any rules. And it's like, what am I going to do? And so I was watching Netflix, and I was on TikTok, and I was comparing myself to others. And it's 2, 3 in the morning, and I'm only getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And, it's talking about testosterone, those sleep cycles, it's not like, they happen in different stages, and you repeat them throughout the night. And sometimes that important sleep's more towards the end of the night. And some of these students aren't getting any of that restorative sleep that's going to help them with the academics. It's going to help them regulate their moods. Mm-hmm. So I do help them kind of set up their routine. And that might include cutting off the social media at night, but also, okay, where is the time in the day when you can look at that stuff? Go ahead, continue to enjoy it, but just within reason. Some people who come to me are doing social media for 3, 4 hours a day or more. So I help them gradually reduce that. I help them increase activities, having a notepad next to their bed where they read or write some affirmations or statements of gratitude. Spending more time in that positive thinking before bed and decreasing that worrying thinking. Sometimes when they're sitting there in bed, suddenly all those negative thoughts just kind of start ratcheting up. So I have them challenge, reframe that, and kind of develop a healthier routine that helps them with their sleeping, with their mood, and eventually I believe it helps them with their motivation and performance academically.
I think there's been so many great suggestions in terms of how to really help with the balance and creating that routine again. And, anything else I was going to add was already said. I just think the only thing else to say is, create that routine. A lot of people have that routine maybe created for them. So if that is, I need help, I really don't know, it's reaching out to maybe your coach, maybe your advisor, maybe somebody that you can go to say, I know I need a routine because I function better with one. But I need help because I don't know how to make one. So ask for help. Do it.
Wow. Well, this has been great so far. Fantastic. Thank you all for your responses. They're so considered, and I think we've got some really useful information here for folks. We're not done yet, but I mentioned I was going to hit pause as we get closer to the 5 o'clock hour, so that everybody has an opportunity to see the survey and respond to it, so we can get your responses in and pick our winners for the raffle. So we'll go ahead and post that now. We're going to share that in the chat, the survey. I would really encourage everyone to take some time to do that. If you're not able to do it now before we end, that's okay. We can have you do it later, but if you get it in now, we'll get you in for the raffle, and we'll go from there. And again, it'll help us out, make sure that what we're doing here today, what's good about it, we can replicate, and where we can improve, we're able to improve. So we'll post that in the chat for everyone here in just a bit. And I will pass it back to Aridin. I believe you were going to ask our next question. Is that right? Great.
Yeah, David, thank you. Those remarks were really insightful. I have to agree that I am kind of guilty of the problems regarding social media. So I'll be sure to implement those solutions into my life. Thank you about that. I'd like to pose this question to Dr. Madrigal, Dr. Mitchell, and Dr. Dotson. Some attendees here might have never worked with a psychologist or a certified mental performance consultant. What does an introductory session with you look like? What are some common things that you work on with clients? Could you clarify?
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in there. See, I didn't put the nose goes quick enough. So I'm a certified mental performance consultant, which means I really just focus on mental skills. I do not work with athletes or clients on anything clinical, but generally in a first session, I really want to get to know, my client, my athlete, what brought them in today, but also, more about them. What was last season like? What's family home life? I really want to try and get a holistic picture of the person that I'm meeting. And I want to share with them as well, kind of like who I am and what we can be doing together in these sessions. So I let them know a little bit about my style and my approach. Other things that we do to cover in the first session, though, just to kind of go over this as well, is we go over things like confidentiality and ethics, as well as what can be shared in these sessions. If a parent is paying or a coach is paying for services, we talk about what information gets relayed back to them, and what information is just going to stay between, you and I. And just, again, anything else that takes us beyond that clinical realm, I let them know that I will work with you to help find you someone that can meet the needs that you need. And I'm going to post just a link in the chat so people can know. So CMPC is Certified Mental Performance Consultant. And that does come from the Association of Applied Sports Psychology. You can go on that website to find a CMPC close to where you're at if you're not in California. So I'll post that in the chat so you can see how to find one that might be in your area or someone that meets your needs.
It's certainly the case that oftentimes when somebody comes to meet with me for therapy as a psychologist, they don't know what to expect. They've never talked about their mental health with anyone before. Maybe they have some fears about people finding out about them speaking with me. So I kind of listen and normalize their experience. And then I kind of provide them with that intro about confidentiality. It's really important with student athletes to know that I'm not going to be sharing a bunch of information with their coaches and other people in athletics. Usually there's a release of information form if I need to give any information to athletics. So I keep their information confidential, and in some situations I consult or provide assistance to some of the other campus partners on their behalf with their consent. And then in that initial meeting, many times these are individuals, 17 to 25, and maybe they've never had the opportunity to talk about their depression, anxiety, trauma history, etc. And so I just kind of hear them and give them space for their story, and then we figure out how we're going to proceed to help them heal and help them move forward. And then I always try to come up with a few things that they can take away from that first session, something to work on, try to get that buy-in so that they'll come back for additional support. And lastly, I cover all the other options. There's individual therapy, there's group therapy, there's psychoeducational workshops, there's apps to help them address certain mental health issues. There's psychoeducational videos, there's bibliotherapy. I cover all the different options so that they know that, they don't have to go it alone anymore. And I think it's very important that we just get people in the door and suddenly they're like, oh, this isn't so bad after all.
Yeah. What do I even else say to that? So basically, limits of confidentiality. I would also then say goal setting. I'm going to also do like an overview of our history, in terms of what a person is bringing in. And to be honest, the fourth thing I want to highlight here is really relationship building, because I think a lot of times in the field, people, we are so eager to do work, we're so eager to help people heal, that we're not really focusing as much on the relationship. how do I, appropriately disclose who I am based off of my multicultural identities to then be able to connect and heal and uplift clients. And I think for a lot of folks and a lot of the clients that I've worked with, there's been such a mistrust of the healthcare system, and rightfully so, given the history in the United States, that I have to first speak to that so they can feel safe and they can feel seen and feel secure enough to actually then start unpacking and doing some of the heavy emotional lifting. So, I'll go through, I got the, checklist of here and there type of symptoms, whoop-de-whoop, all that kind of good stuff. But who am I actually sitting with? How do I communicate to them that even though we have some goals that we want to work on, you're still okay. And I don't need to fix you. There's nothing wrong with you. We're just here to help you grow.
Thank you for all those points. I'm sure they were, insightful for those of us who are not exactly related with the field. Sarah?
Awesome. So we're just gonna do our last question here together before we have to close our time together. So this can be open to anyone. What signs or symptoms of depression that a loved one should be looking out for, or even the person themselves may be noticing some of these warning signs of depression? And then a follow-up question of how can we support our athletes and our students going through this time? How can we be there for them? What can we do to help them out and make this journey as easy as it can be for them?
I just like to say that some of the kind of hallmark signs of depression can be any change in their typical behaviors. Have they stopped enjoying things that they normally love? Are they giving possessions away? Are they just kind of laying in bed? Have they had losses or gains in weight recently? Have they become more irritable? Depression is kind of a vague, nebulous thing, and there's lots of different symptoms that can be associated with it. It's not one thing and, oh, that's depression. Asking how they're doing, asking if they're open to getting support. It can be hard when an individual's depressed to go through the process of getting help. So sitting there with them, helping them make a call to a counseling center, using the number on an insurance card to contact the mental health services through the insurance, or looking at if they've got Medi-Cal, different county agencies that might be able to provide mental health services. Sometimes just reaching out to them and letting them know that you're there can kind of inspire them to get help for some of those depressive symptoms. It doesn't cause suicide to ask them, have you been having thoughts of hurting yourself or ending your life? It's kind of a personal thing, but I've actually lost somebody personally to suicide. And so in my professional work, I try to advocate that we just normalize opening up and asking people how they're doing, including if they're having thoughts of ending their life. It doesn't cause suicide. It can help us get people to treatment. Somebody's in immediate danger, if they have a weapon or some way that they're planning to end their lives, I encourage you to immediately call 911, get a CAT team out there, a crisis assessment team to assess them, or police officers. You can also look at other options for support. If somebody's enrolled in a college or university, there's a chance that institution has a crisis hotline. So you can use the national hotline, which is 1-800-273-8255, or you can use the university's crisis hotline. That helps people like me when you use the university system, because that lets me know that they're getting support and we can provide follow-up services. I hope that's helpful.
Definitely. I'd like to ask one more question. How can
I have a quick follow-up to that? I really just want to actually take the time to thank Dr. Mitchell for sharing that you are a survivor of suicide that way, suicide loss. I think for the general public, I really also want to drive home the point around It doesn't harm anyone to, or doesn't implant the thought of suicide to ask if they're suicidal. And if and when you do ask, just to make sure that you have the resources to follow up if somebody happens to say yes. But again, driving the point home, like, you're not Leonardo DiCaprio. You're not going to have any inception of planting the idea in somebody's head just by asking. So I want to be really clear about that. And also just on like I said, a human connection here with Dr. Mitchell. Thanking you for sharing that, because I don't think in the field we normalize this discussion as much in terms of like who we've lost, and also myself being a survivor of suicide loss. I think that's really, really important for us as the healers to also heal, and it subsequently normalizes and destigmatizes conversations around suicide loss. So we have to do that. And Dr. Mitchell, I don't know you from the small little screen or small little rectangle on my screen right now, but I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Just one other piece to that. There's a really easy kind of assessment. It's called CPR. Not the regular kind of CPR. CPR as, do you have a current plan? Do you have a prior attempt? What are your resources? CPR. And really getting people help as soon as possible. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you to all of our panelists and to all of you who joined us. Thank you, Dr. Dodson, Dr. Mitchell. Just to echo what you had mentioned, Dr. Dodson, for your honesty, your openness, your vulnerability, because it is a witness to others that it's okay to be in that space, to be open about what you've gone through, and that reaching out for help is an important step to take, support, whether you are someone who's struggling directly or you have a loved one who's struggling. On that note, I just want to share a couple of resources, and then we're going to announce the winners of our raffle. If you look in the chat, I just posted a link to the OC Health Info website. They have their really excellent summary of some of the typical signs and symptoms of mental health issues you might see, especially relating to depression and anxiety. If you're experiencing some of those, or someone you know is, or to Dr. Mitchell's point, if you're just feeling off, something you feel like something's not right, I'm feeling different than I used to, or a loved one is, that's the time to reach out for help. Whether you're talking to your primary care physician, just say, hey, this is how I've been feeling, or you call some of the resource lines that are also there on that same website, OC Health Info. Likewise, if you go to our website, connect-oc.org, I've placed that back in the chat as well. Actually, I'll place it in just a second. That's another great place to find some resources. You can go to our website and then resources, and we've got a lot of local here, Orange County resources for you all. And just to echo again what Dr. Mitchell had mentioned, if somebody has said they have, and for that matter, Dr. Bill, if somebody says they have a plan and this is how they're going to do it and this is when they're going to do it, that would be the time to go ahead and call 911 to make sure that person gets the help they need right away. Just thank you to everyone, to our panelists, to all who joined us today. I'll just check in with my team, make sure I'm not missing anything before we wrap up. All right, great. We're right at 5:01, just over the 5 o'clock hour, just over our time. Again, thank you to everyone. Follow up connect-oc.org and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, connect_OC, to find out more about upcoming events. And we look forward to seeing you again. Take care, everyone.